The music industry is a very deceptive place, and a lot of casual listeners would probably be surprised to hear how much deception is used, whether it be deceptive marketing or lying about who even made the songs. So today I want to look into the craziest lies in the music industry, starting off with rappers who faked their entire image. When you're a musician, your image is very important to your artistry, and for many people in rap music, historically it's been important to have a harder or a cooler image. But not everyone who has made music in this genre is like that. Some people are honest about it, but other people were likely too insecure to be themselves and decided to lie about their image. So today we're going to be looking into rappers who lied about their image, starting off with Rick Ross. Also, I want to clarify I'm not mocking these guys or shaming them or even suggesting that they should be promoting something negative, but many fans do find it very disingenuous when you lie about your lifestyle. And to be honest, the drama that spawns from that is pretty entertaining, so let's check it out. Rick Ross has created a career that many young aspiring rappers could only dream of. He has 11 studio albums and has featured on countless songs, many of which make up his most popular works. I mean, you guys know how big of a rapper Rick Ross is. Recently, many people have seen him going viral for having a farm or through his very recent involvement with Drake. Bottom line is, Ross has been in the game for a while. He's never had a super hard image per se, but he has alluded to having a tougher life. Like on the song I'm So Hood when he says, "Snitching ain't gonna cut no time, I'll murder one of you, rob you for your last, then off come the mask." And he has plenty of other songs where he alludes to selling drugs and things along those lines. But somehow, even with all of his accolades, Rick Ross has managed to become known as one of the biggest liars in the game. And to understand how, we gotta look more into his come up. In 1967, Rick Ross was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi. He didn't live there long though, as he eventually moved to Carroll City in Miami. Unlike where Ross was born, Carroll City had a much larger population of around 60,000 people and deals with a lot of problems that come with living in a bigger city. For Ross, these problems showed themselves in the visible crime and poverty in his area that would begin to spark interest in the lifestyle he would portray in his music. The Miami lifestyle seemed to influence Rick Ross's persona, along with the show Miami Vice, which he claims to be a big fan of. While growing up, Ross himself mostly kept on the straight and narrow path, but regardless, at some level he was influenced by his environment. Instead of making money in the common ways that many around him did, and in a way he would go on to rap about, Rick Ross worked at a car wash making about 30 bucks a day. While working at the car wash, he saw a lot of expensive cars owned by a bunch of different types of people like millionaires, dealers, businessmen, and people like that, and he said he was very inspired by them. So even though he was inspired early to make some money, his steps toward becoming those he looked up to would not begin yet. Instead, he went to college. This is where things start to get a little shaky for Rick Ross's image, and a reason why many call him a liar. You may be thinking, with the things Ross raps about, it's a little odd to think he was a man interested in further education. Well, the world seemed to agree, as they discovered he not only got a football scholarship to attend Albany State, but also was studying to become none other than a criminal justice major. Quite the opposite of what he rapped about living. To be fair though, he did drop out after his first year. But what followed his dropping out would only add on to the credibility issues that he would later come to face. Because after he left Albany State at 19, he began working as a correctional officer at a South Florida prison. Well, his time there only lasted 18 months, which to me still feels pretty long in contrast with the things he raps about. The job was no joke and not a position that you could just start a day after signing. To secure that position, Mr. Rose would have to go through a Department of Corrections training academy that required 540 hours of instruction. That's over 20 days in training, so he was clearly committed. The CO portion of Rick Ross's life was discovered in 2008 during his early popularity. A photograph was released by a TMZ adjacent website called The Smoking Gun that depicts a younger Rick Ross in uniform while working at the prison. After getting exposed, for years he would just deny the validity of the picture, making outrageous claims, like saying that it was photoshopped. In countless interviews, he would be drilled on the topic, and every single time he would either deny it or derail the entire conversation.
Trick Daddy recently accused you of working as a prison guard at one point, Rick. Is there any truth to that?
No, that's not true. But that's disappointing to hear that he said that. He said that?
That's what the question said.
Eventually, though, he admitted it, saying it was just a way to make money and that he was just using the job as a way to understand the other side of the drug dealing world.
You know what I mean? So we all did a lot of different things to put us all in position. In position, right? And it's not the obvious. So if Rick Ross did work at one of these places, it wasn't for the obvious reason. Right. You know, it's a lot of gold mines around people's faces that people really don't know how to take advantage of. So yeah, me and we did what we do. You know what I mean?
This clip was taken from like 2 whole minutes of him beating around the bush, claiming that he basically got the job just to get in with the people who were locked up. Eventually though, he got to the point where he was comfortable enough to just straight up admit it.
Can't wait.
So were you a correctional officer at one point?
I was, yeah.
So going all the way back, when was that? How long ago?
Maybe when I was 20.
20 years old.
Yeah.
Since his college major was criminal justice, it didn't seem like his real goal was to become a double agent, but who knows? After that, Ross considered working as a firefighter, but decided to work in construction so he could spend more time following his dream of making music. DeBoss's start in music was under the name Teflon Don. After getting some traction in the music industry and making some connections, including a significant friendship with our boy DJ Khaled, in the mid-2000s he changed his name to Rick Ross. And this is another point in his career that would cause many to call him a liar, all because of his name. If you don't know a lot about the situation, you may wonder what's so bad about his name, and that's the thing. It wasn't his name. In fact, it was the name of a real person. That real person is the notorious former drug lord Freeway Rick Ross, or Freeway Ricky, or whatever else you want to call him. Freeway is known for his 1980s drug empire that dominated LA for years, and eventually led to his sentence of life in prison, ended with a successful appeal that freed him in 2009. And he wasn't some random dealer either, because Freeway once boasted that his empire was so large they were making $1 million a day. This was in the 80s, so if you adjust for inflation, that is almost $5 million of today's money coming in every day. He's so big, in fact, that many say he's a major influence for the popular FX show Snowfall, specifically the protagonist Franklin Saint. And despite how extremely popular Freeway Rick Ross was, Teflon Don still decided to pretty much copy his name.
When the streets had that kind of love for you, the rappers find out. They're some of the first people to find out about that, and he took it and he capitalized on it.
To be fair, Ross did grow up around a lot of similar things that Freeway was partaking in, but the key word is grew up around. He was never doing it like Freeway, as he has claimed in many songs. When this realization was made by the public, many people were upset again that Ross had seemingly lied about his past. And not only was the public upset, but Freeway himself, after being released from prison, decided to sue Rick Ross and WMG for stealing his name as well as his image.
I'd hit him when we was in jail. We talked, and he was supposed to come and see me, and he never did. I wasn't really tripping about that. I got out, start doing my own thing. This lawyer came to me and said, man, Universal owe you $50 million. I said, go get it.
Yeah.
Just like that. That's all it was.
But while Freeway and the public's frustration was reasonable, the court inevitably threw the case out in favor of Rick Ross based on a First Amendment ruling. Ironically enough, this lawsuit was one of Rick Ross's first encounters with the law. He did have a few minor charges here and there, but nothing like Freeway Ricky. All of it came after his breakthrough success, and none of it corroborates anything close to the detailed Miami cocaine cowboy lifestyle he raps about. As his lie-filled past seeped out into the public, it got around to 50 Cent, who after getting into some type of beef with him claimed that the drive-by shooting Ross was involved in 2013 was staged. While there's no solid evidence for that being the case, it appeared to be believable enough at the time for 50 to use it as a shot at Rick Ross because of his tattered credibility. Ironically, the beef between 50 and Ross allegedly started when 50 gave Ross a disgusting look at the BET Awards. It then escalated to some back and forth diss tracks in which 50 coined the popular nickname for Ross, Officer Ricky, alluding to his CO past. And it seemed like a lot of the issues that 50 had with Ricky Rose was his fake image. 50 is known for having countless different beefs and pursuing them to a level like no other, and Ross's lies were plenty of ammunition for 50 to take advantage of. In this case, 50 took more of a creative approach in his public dismantling of DeBoss through a short cartoon series titled Officer Ricky.
Officer Ricky? Damn, Rick. Why you got me up in this man? Is it because I said you and your mama look like the clumps? Well, y'all is some ugly mother.
So clearly Ross had a lot of lies throughout his career. But it's important to note that even if Ross did lie, he obviously did a few things right, as he is now one of the most successful rappers as well as entrepreneurs in the game. And now if you see anyone during this Drake beef making fun of him, calling him a correctional officer or the police or something like that, now you know why. And just because Ricky Rose is a liar doesn't mean that his songs aren't still good. Tyga is generally well liked in the music world and has a long lineup of hit songs and collaborations. While he now is known for making a lot of songs that people would categorize as club music or for the ladies, he was not always this way. In fact, some would say his early style of music is unrecognizable to what it has evolved to today. His career has had many ups and downs like many others, but he's thrived for almost 20 years now since his signing to Lil Wayne's label Young Money Entertainment in 2008. Years later, he would release one of his biggest hits, Rack City, that would catapult him into a new realm of collaborations. One of those collaborations was with none other than Chris Brown, and it was while he was working with Chris Brown that the controversy began. The controversy revolves around his beef with Lil Durk and the spotlight it put on Tyga's debatable authenticity. The beef took place around 2014 and was one that had been brewing for a bit. It all started when the two would be in the studio with Chris Brown working on music, and Tyga previewed a song Durk was on. In Durk's verse on the song, he mentioned having sex with Tyga's ex-wife, Blac Chyna. This interaction started what would go on to be a series of IG posts as well as disses back and forth between the two. During the exchange, Durk went at Tyga for famously getting his chain snatched and pointed out multiple times that he did not view the interactions as beef, but if Tyga wanted. Tyga's responses included calling Durk broke, a nobody, and denying that he ever got his chain snatched.
There was some controversy, some videos online about someone snatching your chain. Can you clear that up for us?
Yeah, man, that's all false, man. It's like, I just don't understand. Like,
eventually the beef fizzled out, but it was the start of Tyga's image being exposed. There was some more drama where people accused him of repping multiple different gangs, but I don't know too much about that personally, so I'm not going to get into it. But how did this self-proclaimed Compton native go from making music that would get him signed by Lil Wayne, having beefs with Lil Durk, and repping different gangs, to songs like Taste, the highest selling song of his career? Well, it all starts with his so-called roots in Compton. Throughout his rise, Tyga would claim that he was born and raised in Compton and often discussed the hard times this brought. Many people believed him and even give him the credit that comes with growing up there. But this was all changed when the truth of Tyga's upbringing was exposed. In 2012, a video from MTV's Bustas, which Tyga was featured on, was leaked. In the show, Tyga competed in a set of pretty ridiculous challenges, which even resulted in him getting booed off stage at one point, in part because he didn't know how to pronounce the word amoeba during a freestyle.
Word.
But the real kicker came from Tyga's introduction on the show. Remember how Tyga has claimed that he grew up in Compton throughout his entire career? Well, during this introduction, he flips that narrative and pretty much his entire image on its head.
Tyga, I got this name when I was young. My mom used to say I looked like Tiger Woods, so I just stuck with that. Grew up, not too tough. Parents got a Range Rover, CL600, doing it big. Not too much hard, but I'm still street. Yeah, it's TYGA. They say I'm not hood cause I stay in the valley. They say I never been in the alley. I tell them cats, I've been in the alley.
First, Tyga has publicly and proudly claimed that his name stands for Thank You God Always, but then he revealed the truth of his name's origin, which was that his mom said he always looked like Tiger Woods, so he went with that. Second, he states that he grew up not too tough and that his parents drove a Range Rover as well as a Mercedes-Benz CL600, both of which are worth more than $50,000. And lastly, he exposes himself saying he grew up in the Valley rather than Compton. And with all the details that Tyga gave us, his experience was nothing like he had made it out to be. This comfortable rich kid lifestyle is almost a complete opposite in comparison to the childhood he portrayed. Tyga went on to say that the show was scripted and he was just doing and saying what he had to in order to succeed, but the damage to his reputation had already been done. The public struggled to believe that someone who grew up in this way would lie and give all of that up for a show. People began to see through the social media beefs and the gang member impersonator that Tyga was. Since that happened, Tyga was more open to admitting he wasn't about that life, although some people did end up vouching for him.
He was born in Burbank or something, and then maybe, he moved down to Compton.
No, he grew up in Pasadena and then went to Compton when he was older because he was going to be a rapper.
No, he is from Compton. We're not going to take away his street cred.
Well, I don't know that he's from Compton or not from Compton. He said on the reality show that he wasn't.
So clearly there was a lot of debate around the subject. Ironically enough, by letting go of the image he had been trying so hard to portray and leaning into what he was actually good at, Tyga actually blew up even more. In Tyga's case, it seems like the public finding out about his come up may have been one of the better things for his career. Plies is a rapper who was hot in the 2000s with songs like Shorty with T-Pain, but his career seemed to be riddled with lies that would later be exposed. Before he was a rapper, Plies was already fairly successful in high school. He played both ways as a wide receiver and defensive back on his football team, was crowned homecoming king, was the valedictorian of his high school class, and was named the best dressed student of his class. After a pretty notable and awarded high school career, he went to college where he would continue to play football at Miami, Ohio as a wide receiver. He eventually made the decision to transfer back to his home state and attend University of Central Florida. But soon after his transfer, he dropped out to pursue music. This newfound interest came because of his stepbrother, Rennell Lawrence Lavatt, who established a record label called Big Gates Records. Plies first appeared on a song in 2003, and ironically enough, he didn't even want to rap but ended up being featured anyway. During a promo run for the song, Plies met an executive at Slip and Slide Records, where he would end up signing a deal that later granted connections for an Atlantic Records distribution deal. In the years following his first song, Plies dropped a few mixtapes that got enough attention to justify his first studio album. His album, The Real Testament, contained his first breakout song and one many of you probably know Plies from, called Shorty featuring T-Pain. Also in this album are a bunch of tracks that discuss both gang life and love. The contrast between the two subjects, as well as the alleged gang life subject matter itself, are a big red flag when it comes to the fraudulent credibility of Plies. Funny enough, around the time of his first album release, Plies featured on the song I mentioned earlier with Rick Ross called I'm So Hood. In the song, Plies speaks on his image saying, "Pants hanging off me now cause my pistol heavy," and "They say I'm fed bound. They call me high risk. I'm a full-blooded goon. Lames make me sick." Following his first major successful project and a plethora of other popular features, Plies would continue his rise by putting out 3 more studio albums. But it was around the time of his third album that the public's magnifying glass looked his way. And when they looked, they found something pretty interesting. Shortly after the release of Plies' second album, Definition of Real, an investigation by Hip Hop DX began. They decided to look into Plies' authenticity, and they were arguing that when Plies uses words like real or goon, he was referring to being hard or a gangster. Others also said that the stories he said in his music were supposed to be reflective of his lifestyle. To be fair to Plies, Hip Hop DX operated their investigation under the assumption that everything he said in his songs he lived, and what they found was that Plies had no criminal record in his home county. They then went on to search other surrounding counties in Florida's public criminal record system. They discovered that in total, Plies had only ever been arrested twice in his home state of Florida. So you might be thinking getting arrested twice isn't something to ignore or scoff at, but it turns out these arrests occurred 2 years prior. This means that they were right around the release of his first album, so it kind of defeats the whole come-up story he had portrayed in his songs. And obviously a criminal record is nothing to be sought after, and there's definitely a real chance he was never caught. But with this information and more to come, it's hard to see Plies as a common criminal. And on top of that, his arrests were for resisting an officer without violence, and his second was because of an incident that occurred at a concert of his. I'm not going to go super deep into the concert drama, but there were some shots let off by Plies' brother, which led to his car getting searched, which led to him getting a misdemeanor for possession of a concealed weapon. It wasn't a big deal though, as he just posted bail and pleaded no contest. Back to Hip Hop DX's investigation, the only other things they found were a few traffic violations and some civil suits. As Hip Hop DX states though, none of these county databases nor the FDLE's report include any juvenile criminal record that might have existed for Plies prior to his 18th birthday. They also point out that first-person accounts of criminal activities on Plies' part are conspicuously scarce in his raw rhymes. They then go on to talk about how many of his songs seem like stories from other people's perspectives, but there are the occasional past tense references to what appear to be the claims of his own criminal activity. One glaring example can be found during his lament on the suffering his alleged criminal activities caused his mother on Runnin' My Mama Crazy, in which he recollects, "Remember the nights me sitting up in a cold cell? I'm waking you up out your sleep. It's me calling you from jail." While passionate, his verses claim that he was ever in a cold cell now appear to be untruthful, as according to the FDLE's report, Plies was never in jail for any period of time prior to 2006. They also pointed out that Plies has also produced a contemptuous image for himself on the screen, including his portrayal as a high-rollin' drug dealer in the video clip for Worth Goin' Fedfo. Another issue for Plies' credibility happened when Jamie Foxx famously discussed a situation he had with him. It all started with an initial phone call with Plies, where, as Foxx states, even Plies' voice was a big shock from what he was expecting due to the content of his music.
Plies. I didn't know anything about Plies. I only heard the good records. I'm on the set with Plies to do this video, and when I heard Plies talk to me, it blew my mind, because when I got on the phone, I was trying to get where he was. Yo, what's up, nigga? What we doing with this video, cuz? And he was like, first of all, I want to make sure that we have the particulars. I'm not kidding.
Further down the road, when the two were together on a set for a video, a group of guys would approach in what Fox details an intimidating manner. When they approached, Plies, The Dream, and both of their security teams ran. Jamie said he approached the group and calmed things down, but Plies' actions had already been burned into Fox's mind.
So I get out there, we can't find Plies. And I understand why. You know why? Because he was afraid for his life. Because you never know, he could have died.
He ran to the bathroom.
As it turns out, the approaching group contained the rapper 40 Glock, who recounts a similar interaction going down, stating he wasn't even there to cause any issues.
This jumped up and ran himself in the bathroom, cuz. We wasn't coming to do shit to that nigga. He just jumped up and ran, cuz. You know what I mean? We was coming to hit him up and talk to him, let him know what's going on, like da-da-da-da, but nigga, we didn't come to sock this nigga or do nothing. As long as he wasn't setting up file, you talking some real niggas.
But regardless, following the incident, a beef was started that resulted in Plies releasing his diss letter to the industry, and then 40's response returned to sender. It's important to note that Plies denies any of this going down the way that Jamie Foxx does, but to be fair, who would even admit to it going down like that, especially when your credibility is on the line? Plies even spoke on the incident saying, "People lie to enhance their situation," which is pretty ironic. With all of this being evident, Plies is still generally well liked and well regarded for his intelligence. Some say his retelling of stories, many of which allegedly are rumored to come from his family members rather than himself, pose a negative effect and take advantage of those who actually go through what he talks about in his songs. Regardless, nowadays Plies has mostly been seen on social media in a series of comedic, lighthearted posts that give advice to the youth, as well as dropping the occasional song or project here and there. So if there's anything to be learned from this video, it's that it's okay to be yourself, especially in the music industry, because if you lie, people will find out about it and then clown you for the rest of your career. And while faking your image and your lifestyle is one thing, I think it's another thing to completely lie about who's actually writing your songs. As listeners, I think many of us tend to assume that the artists we are listening to are writing their own music, or at the very least, they're writing some of the songs. But throughout the history of the music industry, actually the majority of its history, most of the big artists did not actually write their songs, they just performed them. And while a lot of the time songwriters were credited, many other times they weren't, which people nowadays refer to as ghostwriting. Like I said, as listeners, we often tend to assume that our favorite artists are writing their tracks. But it's actually insane how little that is the case in mainstream music and how pervasive ghostwriting is in the music industry. So to truly understand the scope of this phenomenon, we need to look at the inception of the recording industry. You might assume that ghostwriting is more of a modern occurrence, but you'd actually be wrong. Ghostwriting has been a part of music since the very beginning. Mozart even worked as a ghostwriter, if you could call it that, where he was paid to make songs for rich people and then the rich people would just pass them off as their own. In fact, in the 50s and early 60s, when modern popular music was born, that was really the golden age of ghostwriting. Huge artists like Elvis or Frank Sinatra wrote virtually none of their songs, and in many ways, a lot of the artists of this period were mostly just performers and vocalists. Usually, songwriters were credited on the records, meaning it's hard to call them ghostwriters, but in a lot of other cases, they weren't. It was only recently, for example, that we learned that many of Sinatra's songs were wrongly credited to a guy named Axel Stordahl, when in fact some of them have been written by ghostwriters like George Saravo and Lowell Martin, who to this day are not properly credited. Even some of the musicians from this era who claim to write their own songs may have also been secretly using ghostwriters. Chuck Berry might be the father of rock and roll, but according to his pianist Johnny Johnson, he was also a fraud. Johnson actually sued Berry in 2000, alleging that he had co-written songs like Johnny Be Good and Sweet Little 16 with him, but received no credits or royalties, which resulted in him spending a lot of his life in poverty. The suit was eventually dismissed, and it did conclude that Johnson had helped Berry, but there wasn't enough evidence to prove his contributions were big enough to warrant songwriting credits. Plus, Chuck eventually got a taste of his own medicine when the Beach Boys pretty much ripped off his song Sweet Little 16 with their hit Surfin' USA. Although eventually Chuck Berry did get a co-writing credit and a cut of the royalties from Surfin' USA, the same was not true, however, of the Beach Boys hit Fun Fun Fun, which pretty clearly took a lot from Johnny Be Good. Overall, it seemed like the 50s and the early 60s had a much more relaxed attitude towards ghostwriting or properly crediting musicians. James Jamerson, for example, is today regarded as one of the greatest bassists of all time, playing on virtually every major Motown hit of the 60s and early 70s. But Motown only began crediting session musicians in the 1970s, meaning we don't actually know just how many songs he played on. Plus, many of the bass lines we think he came up with may actually have been the work of a different musician called Carol Kaye instead. All of this changed, however, when four guys from Liverpool came into the scene: the Beatles. In the early 1960s, the Beatles weren't the first band to write nearly all of their songs themselves, but they were so insanely popular that they kind of reshaped listeners' expectations around them. One of the Beatles' big appeals was their authenticity. They seemed like real people. Fans weren't just connecting with their music, but they also connected with the members as well. So in the wake of the Beatles' success, ghostwriting and songwriters separate from the artists in general sort of disappeared across the industry, or at least it was a bit more low-key. You had artists like Pink Floyd, Queen, the Rolling Stones, and many more groups which all wrote most of their own music. In fact, the listeners' expectations had changed so much that in the mid-60s, we saw the first ever ghostwriting scandal involving the Monkees. The Monkees might be a little bit forgotten by now, aside from a few hits like I'm a Believer, but at one point the Monkees were extremely successful. They were up there with the Beatles in terms of popularity, especially with their album More of the Monkees. They were so successful because they were kind of like the American Beatles. I mean, they even looked a little similar. Audiences, particularly outside of the US, would have no reason to think that they were different from any other band, made of a group of friends writing their own music. Unlike earlier releases from artists like Frank Sinatra, which listed the songwriters on the back of the album covers, the Monkees did not do that. But it turned out that the Monkees were a fictional band created for an NBC sitcom called The Monkees, and the band members were all actors who not only didn't write the music, but they didn't even play their own instruments. Their singing was the only contribution. The problem was that the Monkees album soon became far more successful than the Monkees TV show, and the music was sold in international markets where the show wasn't shown. Plenty of people had assumed that they were listening to the work of a few normal guys from California, not a somewhat corporate attempt at replacing the Beatles, where the band members weren't even playing their own instruments. When people found this out, often they felt duped. As a result, the Monkees became deeply uncool. One writer described them as rock's first great embarrassment. Well, to this day, they have not been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which band member Peter Tork blamed on the music industry holding a grudge against them for not writing their own songs. So in less than a decade, the music industry had completely changed. In the 50s, songwriters and artists were, in the mainstream at least, almost completely different professions. According to one estimate, 80% of the songs from this era involved outside, often uncredited songwriters. But of the 5 best-selling artists of the 1960s, only Elvis had no involvement in writing his songs. The 70s continued this trend, and this is when ghostwriting sort of started to go downhill. Of the decade's 5 best-selling artists, Elton John was the only one who didn't write all of his own songs, and even then he played a role in it. The 1970s also saw the rise of the singer-songwriter led by artists like Carole King and Neil Young, and a big appeal of their music was the fact that it was introspective or confessional, with lyrics built around personal experience. So when a lot of popular songs deal with these things, having a ghostwriter is just, that doesn't work. But then the 80s began to see a shift back in the opposite direction. As pop music began to grow as a genre, distinct from rock and other styles, there was a lot less focus on authenticity and real personal experiences, but it was more on making a catchy hook and a good song. And probably the best example of this is Frank Farian. Frank rose to prominence as the songwriter, producer, and lead singer for the German Europop band Boney M, best known for their hit song Rasputin, and they became extremely successful in the late 70s and early 80s. However, if you look at Boney M's concerts or their marketing, Frank Farian, who looked like this, is nowhere to be seen. Understandably, Farian thought the group would be much more popular and marketable if he took a backseat in the group's promotion. He didn't have the dance moves or the good looks necessary to make a splash on something like MTV. Instead, the official frontman was Bobby Farrell, who was nowhere to be found on the group's album, but he did sing in concert. A few years later, it also emerged that backing singer Maisie Williams wasn't used in the studio either. The recording company wasn't trying too hard to hide Farian's involvement, but they didn't shout it from the rooftops, and nobody really cared as this kind of thing was relatively common in disco, at least at the time. So in 1988, Farian decided to take it one step further. He set up the group called Milli Vanilli, a duo consisting of Fab Morvan and Rob Pilatus. Like with Boney M, Farian would write the group's songs. Like with Boney M, Rob and Fab were not in the studio at all. But unlike Boney M, they wouldn't even be allowed to sing in concerts either. Instead, they lip-synced to back tracks created by the studio musicians who were the group's real singers. And unlike with Boney M, as I'm sure many of you are aware, they went to great lengths to deceive everyone. The group's records even credited Rob and Fab as the vocalists, but then it all came crashing down in one extremely infamous performance. This resulted in a ton of backlash. There was already doubts about the group's authenticity since they weren't the best English speakers, but now there was solid proof and it had been exposed in the most humiliating way possible. As Rob later said, "I knew right then and there it was the beginning of the end for Milli Vanilli. When my voice got stuck in the computer and it just kept repeating and repeating, I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I just ran off the stage." Their Grammy was revoked, numerous consumer fraud lawsuits were filed, and their record company, Arista, completely deleted Milli Vanilli's albums from their catalog. But unfortunately, Rob and Fab became public enemies, rather than Frank Farian or the people behind Milli Vanilli. Rob and Fab maintained that they were the victims in this whole situation, which realistically they were. They said they signed a deal with the devil, with Rob saying the last 2 years of their lives had been a total nightmare. We've had to lie to everybody, we are singers, but that maniac Frank Farian would never allow us to express ourselves. So in the public back then, there was still some backlash when it came to being deceptive or using ghostwriters, but that did not stop the growth of these practices. Michael Jackson and Madonna, the best sellers of the 80s, both extensively used outside writers. So did the 4 biggest artists of the 90s. However, by the time we reached the 2010s, singer-songwriters who composed their music on their own are pretty much dead. And of the 10 best-selling artists of the decade, only Ed Sheeran and Eminem were penning all their own songs. The average hit song of the modern era credits 4.53 writers. Large writing teams in particular have exploded. I mean, Kanye West's song All Day has 21 credited writers.
Cara DioGuardi, Justin Tranter, and Ross Golan together are responsible for some of the most memorable pop music in the past decade. Last year alone, Golan and Tranter had 8 top 20 hits, 5 that went to #1.
So how did this happen? How did ghostwriting go from being the biggest thing ever to kind of falling off and being hated to becoming another big deal where writing and ghostwriting both are extremely popular in the modern era? Well, probably one of the biggest drivers was simply the increased commercialization of music. From the early 70s to the 2000s, the revenue of music sales in the US has increased around 6 times. Ironically, people in the 60s didn't even think popular music would be a thing, with members of the Wrecking Crew, the most successful group of studio musicians from that era, believing that it would only last for around another decade. But obviously, this wasn't what happened. From the perspective of the major labels, the singer-songwriter model became increasingly seen as a barrier to greater revenue. An artist who writes all of their own songs can expect to demand a heavy cut of the royalty fees, and they can only write so many songs themselves, especially in between touring and promotion. And worst of all, they might decide to start following their own artistic vision rather than chasing trends and record sales above all else. Outside songwriters, however, have none of these problems. Teams of dozens of people can obviously put out music extremely quickly. Their lack of star power means you can get away with paying them less, and their whole job involves learning to imitate and conform to whatever styles are selling best at that particular moment. As one anonymous music manager put it, I saw a pop star on TV once going, "I'm writing my new album myself," and I just thought, you stupid fool. You're a decent pop star, but you're not a writer. If you've got Max Martin writing you a song, why turn it down? The fact is that performing and writing are different talents. Speaking of Max Martin, you have producers and writers such as himself or Dr. Luke, who together are responsible for roughly 46 #1 songs, from artists like Taylor Swift, Britney Spears, Katy Perry, The Weeknd, Ariana Grande, Kesha, Doja Cat, Kelly Clarkson, Miley Cyrus, and many more. Now, throughout this video, I've been using the words writers and ghostwriters interchangeably, but there's definitely a difference. Ghostwriters aren't credited, and songwriters are. However, that distinction is becoming increasingly hazy. In the era of physical media, it was pretty easy to see who was writing the songs you were listening to, as pretty much every record would list the songwriters on the back. But you might have listened to, for example, To Pimp a Butterfly a few times without ever hearing the names Terrence Martin and Rose McKinney, despite the fact that they collaborated with Kendrick in writing multiple songs on the album. As one writer, Gregory Taylor, said, a lot of times people think, oh, they got the credit, so they're not a ghostwriter. But you kind of still are if it's not common knowledge that you worked on the record. And this isn't necessarily a problem. For example, large collaborative writing teams have resulted in some great albums, like Kanye West's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy being a great example. On a remote Hawaiian island, he set up what one journalist called Rap Camp, with dozens of rappers, writers, and producers collaborating over many months, with Kanye's primary role being that of a musical chairman. The result was an album which credits in total 56 writers and producers. We also don't know the extent to which a writer is helping write a song even when they are credited. They could have written the entire thing or one line. For example, when painter Damien Hirst was criticized for only drawing 5 out of 1,000 paintings, he argued, you have to look at it as though the artist is an architect. And we don't have a problem that great architects don't actually build the houses. Plus, the writing industry has created a lot of great job opportunities for aspiring musicians. Many successful musicians have also got their start in the music industry writing for other artists. Frank Ocean, Sia, Bruno Mars, and many more first got their foot in the door by penning songs for other people. And successful ghostwriters or songwriters are usually paid $10 to $20K per song. Credited songs get a cut of the royalties of any song. Big names in the industry can get paid even more, with MF Grimm, for example, who worked with the biggest rappers of the 90s, saying that he charged a rate of over $1,000 per every bar. On top of this, famous musicians sometimes just like to write songs songs for fun for other artists. Some of them are normal people and are just friends with other artists.
You were saying then that you were kind of mucking around trying to find reasons to write for people and see what would
Yeah.
land.
I wanted to just write pop songs for people, so I kind of did that.
So ghostwriting and or credited writing are very common, and the line can get a little blurry. But like I said, it can create a lot of opportunities and job opportunities for aspiring musicians. However, there are also some problems that it can cause. And I don't think there's any genre where that's more truthful than hip-hop. It's not too hard to see why ghostwriting or writing teams are particularly controversial when it comes to rap music. As one music manager described, credibility is key in hip-hop. In R&B, for instance, the majority of the stories are about love and sex. They can relate to anyone. But 50 Cent rapping about being shot 9 times, that's personal. Rap lyrics should be hyper-personal and hyper-localized.
If I ever need a ghostwriter, I need to just fucking put the mic down. Anybody out here that does use ghostwriters, that's fine. If that's what you do, that's fine.
There are other reasons as well, like bragging about your skill as a rapper is a major part of hip-hop as well, and you can probably name a bunch of rap songs where people are doing this. Obviously, you can't brag about being the greatest rapper and then not actually write your own songs. The art of writing is also just far more integral to rappers than it is to other kind of vocalists. Lyricism is a core part of hip-hop where it's not quite as important in other genres. You can be a great singer without ever writing your own lyrics, but whether you can be a great rapper without actually penning your own bars is a lot more debated. Historically though, ghostwriting has been integral to hip-hop as much as it has been in any other genre. Rapper's Delight by the Sugar Hill Gang, which is widely regarded as the first hip-hop hit song of all time, featured many rhymes written by the uncredited Grandmaster Caz. One of the group's members' managers had borrowed Caz's personal book of rhymes, and several lines from it were lifted directly into the song, without Caz ever being credited. Additionally, you might not know just how many rappers have written bars for other people. Nas, for instance, was behind Will Smith's Getting Jiggy With It. Method Man worked on Old Dirty Bastard's debut record, and Jay-Z actually wrote pretty much all the lyrics for the iconic Still Dre. As one journalist said of ghostwriting, it is the hip-hop apprenticeship, a way for a young talent to learn their craft and bring new life to fading stars.
A lot of ghostwriters in hip-hop are rappers who didn't make it. Not all, but a lot of them are rappers who didn't make it. Right. They was trying to go and they super nice, but it was something. Either their voice was weird, their look didn't really sell, whatever it was. They may be kind of an introvert. A lot of them are rappers who didn't make it, but their pen was crazy, so they just jumped into that.
These are 3 examples where the writer was actually properly credited. But since the stigma around not writing your own bars is far bigger in rap than any other genre, if they're ever accused of it, the rapper will probably deny it. Instead, it may be surprising to hear that Kanye denied this in the beginning of his career. On Barry Bonds Off of Graduation, he raps, "I don't need writers, I might bounce ideas, but only I could come up with some of this shit like this." This wasn't quite true though, and even on Kanye's first big hit, Jesus Walks, all of the lyrics were written by Rhymefest. In 2011, meanwhile, rapper Consequence credibly claimed he had written Champion and other tracks off Graduation without ever being credited. Meaning, who knows, perhaps even Kanye's bars about how he doesn't use ghostwriters were written by a ghostwriter. But later on in his career, Kanye had passed the point of caring. He openly admitted that he had only penned 2 bars on Violent Crimes, and all the rest of it was the work of a rapper and ghostwriter named Partisan Fontaine. You might think that Fontaine was happy about being credited, but he actually told GQ he was pissed, saying nobody needed to know. This is because he was trying to get his solo career off the ground at that time, and he didn't want these ghostwriting rumors overshadowing it, much like they did with Quentin Miller and Drake, but we'll get into that soon. This is another problem though when talking about ghostwriting in hip-hop. It's shrouded in mystery. Ghostwriters themselves are often reluctant to disclose the truth because not only do they sign NDAs, which legally prohibits them from discussing it, but if they're known to have a loose mouth, it could very likely damage their career. As ghostwriter Shaquan Lewis says, "I make more money when y'all ain't talking about ghostwriting. It's better business for me when nobody cares."
A ghostwriter is a person that writes records for other motherfuckers. I wrote some records for some motherfuckers, but guess what, Denver? They ain't pay me my motherfucking money, man. Ain't that fucked up? First of all, I didn't want to make this shit. There's a lot of rap niggas out here faking this shit. I'm a ghostwriter. I'm the cat you don't see. I write hits for rappers you like and charge them a fee. Don't get me wrong, dog. It's a cheddar that counts. But fuck Puff Daddy, cause this fucking check bounced. You know if I keep around no single...
And like I said, there's never been a more infamous example of ghostwriting than with Drake. Back in 2015, Drake and Meek Mill collaborated on the track Rico from Meek Mill's album Dreams Worth More Than Money. This eventually sparked one of the biggest rap beefs of the 2010s. Meek tweeted, "Stop comparing Drake to me too. he don't write his own raps. He later even said that if he had known that Drake didn't write his own bars beforehand, he would have never let him on that track, saying, "I don't trick my fans." Meek specifically identified an up-and-coming rapper named Quentin Miller as Drake's ghostwriter. Pusha T also referenced him on his track Infrared with the line, "It was written like Nas, but it came from Quentin." But it turned out that Quentin Miller wasn't actually a technical ghostwriter at all. He had actually been credited as a writer on 4 songs from Drake's mixtape. If you're reading this, it's too late. However, it is also possible and even likely that Quentin Miller did ghostwrite on some Drake songs and just never got credited. Miller himself actually accused Drake of not properly paying him, saying, "I never got a single publishing check off any song. I had to feed my family off getting paid under the table." This kind of thing is extremely common, and a lot of ghostwriters have been scammed out of their deserved earnings at one point or another. And Quentin wasn't happy with Meek Mill either, saying that he believed he robbed him of a big year, with his aspiring rap career being extremely overshadowed by his reputation as a ghostwriter. And Drake is far from the only rapper to not be writing all of his bars. Partisan Fontaine, that I mentioned earlier, also was credited as a co-writer on Cardi B's breakout single Bodak Yellow, resulting in her facing a lot of ghostwriter accusations as well. She clarified Fontaine was simply a co-writer, saying, "I do write a lot of my own shit. That's the thing." But later she went on the offensive, saying, "What you need to do is ask your favorite rappers about their ghostwriters." And later, all these rappers have writers, even the ones that be saying they don't. They lying. And this seems to be pretty accurate. As one ghostwriter said, "Dumb people can argue all day about whether or not ghostwriting is right or wrong because it really doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is that ghostwriting is the future of hip-hop because either you get a skilled team of writers behind you or you get run over by an MC who does." Even some rappers you might expect to do all of their own work could be guilty. There have been rumors for years, for instance, that MF Doom used his friend MF Grimm as a ghostwriter on some of his tracks. Lil Wayne has also faced numerous accusations over the years. So who do we know who's writing their own lyrics? Well, according to Forbes, industry insiders usually mention a few names, including J. Cole, Kendrick, Eminem, Jay-Z, and 50 Cent, and even then we can't be certain. There's no way we'll ever know if our favorite artists are writing their songs or not. They could have ghostwriters, and if they have writing credits, that writer could have written the entire song or just one line. Or maybe they just bounced an idea and helped them come up with some lyrics. There's really no way to know for sure. Although I can almost guarantee you that mainstream pop music especially is littered with writers and ghostwriters. So is it a good thing or a bad thing that a lot of artists may not be writing their own songs? Well, I think it does depend. There's a big difference between a Kanye bringing in a bunch of collaborators to make his album as good as it can be, and another rapper passing someone else's work off as their own. And while most people probably know that artists use writers or ghostwriters, they probably don't realize how many artists are botting their songs. But on January 23rd of 2020, a tweet went live from a user named Carlemagne who said, "French Montana's out here buying streams in a desperate attempt to turn his 3-month-old flop song into a hit." This was in reference to his song Writing on the Wall featuring Cardi B and Post Malone, which had been released about 3 months prior. The song charted when it first came out for 5 weeks, and then fell out of the top 200 on Spotify. Then it eventually re-entered the Spotify charts and also reached a new peak. But what was odd about this is that despite it hitting number 27 on the Spotify charts, it was way down at 1,192 on the Apple Music charts. Then Carlemagne searched the song on Twitter and saw a bunch of people on Twitter saying that their Spotify was hacked and was playing French Montana's song Writing on the Wall. The tweets about the hacks were all posted between the 18th and the 25th of December, and the song charted again on the 22nd. So it was basically confirmed that French Montana was faking his streams. But it isn't like he's some random artist. He's a Grammy-nominated artist with tons of huge songs, who was also signed to Epic Records, which is a division of Sony, one of the big 3 record labels. And while French Montana was one of the few that got caught, there are many other artists in the music industry faking their streams, followers, likes, and so much more. A lot of fans online have been realizing what's going on, with tweets about Atlantic Records faking views and comments on videos from artists like Lil Uzi Vert, Roddy Ricch, A Boogie with a Hoodie, and Don Toliver. Clearly, this is a common occurrence in the music industry, and many artists other than the ones I listed are doing it. So join me today as we look into fake streams, the biggest scam in the music industry. In January of this year, France's National Music Association, or however the hell you pronounce this, did a study that found that about 1 to 3% of streams in the country were fraudulent. The streaming service Deezer said that about 7% of the streams on their platform are also fake. A company named BeatDap that makes software to detect fake streams for streaming services thinks that about 10% of all global streams are fraudulent. Even last year, the German Music Industry Association said they are focused on curbing streaming manipulation and streaming fraud, emphasizing the the fact that they are a central concern for the music industry. The estimated amount of money stolen from artists by these fake streams is just mind-blowing, and I'm going to touch more on that later. So we know these huge statistics of people faking their streams, but who are the people that are actually doing it? Well, in the study done in France, they found the genre that had the most fraudulent streams was rap, which is understandable as it is the most popular genre in France and in many other countries as well. But given the previous estimates of up to 10% of all streams being faked, it's very likely that a lot of other genres also suffer from fake streams. I think most people interested in music or involved in the music industry know that a ton of small artists pay for plays on SoundCloud or streams on Spotify. It's pretty common and similar to how people buy views for their YouTube or bought their viewers on Twitch. I could just Google right now, buy streams for SoundCloud, and probably find a ton of websites willing to do this for me for relatively cheap. I'll touch more on why people do this later, but one obvious reason is to make people think that they're poppin', which incites others to check them out. But I'm not so interested in small artists doing that because we already know that. What fascinates me is seeing big artists like French Montana faking their streams. In a suspiciously now deleted Vice documentary on fake streams, a Vice documentary maker named Michael K. Williams was able to interview a music industry insider named Chad Focus, who exposed the world of fake streams. He made the claim that all of the huge artists signed to labels, whether or not they know it, are benefiting from fake streams.
These artists are on these streaming phones, they are on these streaming platforms. Even from a guy like a J. Cole that say how many artists get streams from these bots, they not as hot as they seem. Well, J. Cole is a part of that system as well, and he don't even know it. The major labels are running these streaming phones, they're running these streaming numbers, they're running these setups.
So this is obviously a very bold claim, but is it really that far-fetched? Like I said earlier, we saw tweets with pictures showing off tons of big-name artists that are signed to Atlantic Records with fake comments and likely fake views on their music videos as well. And Atlantic Records is under Warner Music Group, another one of the big 3 record labels. So far, we have seen artists under 2 of the 3 big record labels manipulating their streams. Interestingly enough, one of the people on Twitter who pointed out Don Toliver's comments, Bryce Fitz, and the guy who wrote the French Montana thread were both suspended on Twitter following their tweets, although Bryce did get his Twitter back. Another person that got caught up in a fake stream scandal was G-Eazy. In 2021, Rolling Stone posted an article called Inside the Black Market, where artists can pay for millions of streams. The general director of the International Confederation of Music Publishers admitted in the article that there is a black market for pay-for-play. So in the expose, Rolling Stone mentioned that 2 CEOs of a management group called the Blueprint Group got into contact with someone named Joshua Mack. The Blueprint Group manages artists like G-Eazy, Lil Nas X, Trippie Redd, and plenty more. Rolling Stone was able to get the audio from the phone call, and one of G-Eazy's people said, "I want this to be big." Joshua Mack claimed that they can generate 200 million streams a month.
I have a like a super basic question. When you say you're going to do Spotify and do Apple, like what exactly does that mean? What are you doing?
One, we're saving the album and running the numbers up. That's the first thing. Across multiple devices, all premium. Okay. 2, we're driving traffic.
Wait, hold on. I have more questions about that. So, like, how is that happening?
We basically, crack the code and understand how to manipulate the system and hit astronomical numbers.
So what he's describing here sounds like stream farms, but again, I'm going to touch on that more a little bit later. But Joshua Mack said in the phone call that he works with tons of major labels and big artists. He said, if we stop pressing the buttons, the people at the labels would not be able to be getting the type of response and support they're getting. In the expose, Rolling Stone even interviewed an anonymous A&R from a prominent label who said, there are a few third-party companies out there running this for a lot of the major companies. We use them too for some of our artists. We agree to a certain amount of money for a certain amount of streams, and we can spread that out among our artists. It's like, we're good, we just need performance enhancing steroids to be a little bit better. G-Eazy is also signed to Sony, but I also want to clarify that it is possible that not all of these major labels know what's going on. They very well could be, but I'm not going to make any accusations, because I don't want a lawsuit. Actually, one indie label manager saw one of his artist songs have a huge jump in streams and investigated it just to find out the new jump in streams was fake. So after looking at all of these examples and bringing up all the statistics, it seems pretty common. It's actually so common that one person who I talked to about a video I made nonchalantly told me their label wanted to buy some true views for my video. Now, I don't even know what true views are, but obviously I declined because, I'm a man of integrity, and it's also just really shady and weird. But I was also fascinated fascinated at how casually it was brought up as if it's just another day in the music industry. So this is obviously a big deal, and it's much larger than what most of us probably thought it was. So if that's the case, then why has it gone undetected for so long? Well, as it turns out, fake streams are nothing new and have existed for a very long time in many different ways. Before streaming services even existed, the music industry wasn't really that good at keeping track of album sales. In the early days of the music industry, Billboard charts were based on the rankings of the albums sold in stores. So if one album in particular was sold the most, that is how they would get their data. I don't fully understand how this worked, but it seemed really messy. Music measurement, as we know now, started in the United States in 1991, when record stores started sending reports to a company called SoundScan. But even then, tracking album sales was not easy. For example, in 2006, a rumor was being spread that Michael Jackson had sold over 750 million albums in his life. This is because one of his publicists was telling fan clubs that MJ had exceeded over 250 million units, which people assumed meant albums, when in reality it probably meant singles. For the longest time, there wasn't a great way to verify album sales. Michael Jackson actually holds the Guinness World Record for most albums sold, but Guinness World Records themselves say sales figures vary wildly from source to source. They don't even know how many units he actually sold, which obviously he still holds that title because he just sold a crazy amount, but the fact they don't even know the exact number is astounding. And while this lack of data isn't confirmation that people manipulated it intentionally, I'm sure there were some people and maybe even labels inflating their numbers. Of course, there was also radio payola, which is still a thing despite it being illegal now. If you aren't aware, it's basically just when labels pay radio stations to play their artist's song. It's a pretty simple idea and a very common thing. But what about the streaming age? What kind of methods are people using now to fake their streams? Well, that's where stream manipulation comes in.
Question.
We're all familiar with the J. Cole line where he says, "How many faking they streams, getting they plays from machines? I can see behind the smoke and mirrors people aren't really big as they seem." Ironically enough, this was on 21 Savage's song A Lot, and 21 is an artist who has also been accused of stream manipulation. Post Malone in 21 Savage's song Rockstar was involved in a stream manipulation controversy because Republic Records posted a version of the song on YouTube that was just the chorus on loop. Many people accused them of attempting to trick fans into thinking it's the real song, and every view on this video aids towards its spot on the charts. And this video had a whopping 41 million views before it was deleted. Of course, the song was very successful, and I'm not blaming 21 Savage or Post Malone, but the YouTube loophole very well could have aided that song in going #1 on the Billboard charts. Another example is when the streaming service Tidal came under fire in 2018 for manipulating the streams on their platform as well. While the methods aren't exactly known, they claim that Kanye's The Life of Pablo was streamed 250 million times in 10 days, and that Beyonce's Lemonade was streamed 306 million times in 15 days. Those are crazy numbers, especially for a smaller streaming service like Tidal. But it's even more crazy when you realize that they were boasting their 3 million users. This would mean that every subscriber would have had to listen to Kanye's album 8 times a day on average. Obviously, this seems fake, and if it wasn't obvious enough, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology investigated Tidal and found that the streams were indeed manipulated. They also found that Tidal lied about how many subscribers they had, as it was actually closer to 1 million. But perhaps the biggest and most common form of stream manipulation is album bundles. So album bundles are when an artist sells something, typically merch, and throws in an album to help boost sales, which gives them a higher spot on the Billboard charts. Pretty much every major artist has done this, but some have done it in a weird and seemingly unfair way. Like when DJ Khaled was selling energy drinks bundled with his album Father of Assad, which was actually disqualified by Billboard, which prompted DJ Khaled to sue them. It looks like Billboard did not believe in our favorite DJ. I'm not going to touch too much on this since it's so common and it really isn't the worst form of stream manipulation. Also, Billboard got rid of merch bundles and then reintroduced it in a much more limited fashion, so it seems like they're getting a bit more strict with their charting requirements. Labels have also been accused of buying their own artists' albums to boost the sales, but that one's pretty self-explanatory. However, stream manipulation is one of the more publicly known methods. Most people are familiar with it, but there are many more discreet ways in which people fake their streams. A professor from the University of Texas wrote a paper called Fake Streams, Listening Bots, and Click Farms, which detailed some of these methods. One of the most known and obvious methods are bots. Like I said earlier, you can literally just Google buy Spotify streams and you will likely be met with a bunch of bot services. The indie label manager I mentioned earlier thinks that people are even hacking into legitimate accounts and streaming from those accounts when they're not streaming music, which sounds a lot like the French Montana situation. One guy on Reddit even posted that a label he signed with was using bots to boost his streams. This is a pretty known issue, and streaming services like Spotify do their best to crack down on it. it. And while it's pretty much impossible to entirely get rid of the issue just because there's so many fake streams, Spotify and other services do their best to get rid of it. However, streaming farms are something you've probably heard mentioned in this video, and they are by far the weirdest and sketchiest way artists get fake streams on their songs. It's probably the most discreet way too. In the Vice documentary I previously mentioned, Chad Focus went into detail about how streaming farms work.
Today's world, everybody's using a streaming farm. Streaming farm, man, is a bunch of different cell phones that sign up to Spotify. They play your record over and over again. You get streams, you get paid. You know, plain and simple. Being able to use my streaming platforms, man, I was able to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. We were able to chart on Billboard. We were able to chart on Spotify. We were able to chart on Apple Music, Tidal, Shazam. These streaming farms into legitimate money.
This isn't a huge secret. Many people like Russ, for example, have been very outspoken about this.
So you can hire companies to fake your streams?
Hell yeah. What?
Yeah, I've heard people say that. I'm not
Hell
in the,
yeah.
I'm not in the music business.
Hell yeah.
Notice how Charlemagne, who's in the music industry, has even heard of labels doing this. So like we heard, streaming farms are literally just tons of phones that have people clicking songs repeatedly to give songs more streams. Streaming farms aren't unique to just music either. These types of setups will be used for viewing ads and doing all sorts of other things. And looking at all this has me wanting to set one up for my channel. Who knows how much money I could be making. Anyways, labels will pay these people to farm streams secretly, and typically they're based outside of the United States. In the paper I mentioned earlier, the author Eric Drott said that many of these people work in places like the Philippines and Bangladesh, where they are paid next to nothing and suffer psychological distress from hearing the sound of clicking day in and day out.
If you're around the right people, you know how to manipulate the shit. It's not my place, but there's some big niggas that have like warehouses filled with phones that got like 4 day laborers running around all day, like people that we know in this business right now. People that you highly respect. No way, yeah. On God.
Michael Williams even found a stream farm in New York and interviewed the guy who was running it. The guy he interviewed said that 100,000 streams would be about $1,500, and he also said he would have labels and A&Rs come through making deals with him. He even confirmed that French Montana getting caught was part of the reason that people were finally waking up to the reality of streaming farms. So streaming farms are clearly the craziest and probably best way for artists and labels to get real streams to boost their appearance. But all of this begs the question, why? Why does this matter, and why do labels and artists do this? Well, there are a few reasons, but 2 stand out to me the most. The first reason that people do this is to get attention. Obviously, small artists do this to get the attention of labels, but why would major labels do it? Well, studies have actually shown that when songs have more plays and appear more popular, it makes you more inclined to listen. I went over a study in a previous video, so I'm going to play a quick clip to demonstrate what I mean. In a study done by Columbia University in 2006, they showed some people music websites with a bunch of songs and told them to download their favorites. Some sites had rankings of the most popular songs and some didn't. It showed that people who saw the rankings were more likely to download the popular songs. They then did a second experiment where they did the same thing, but this time they sent out websites with the actual download statistics and then some websites with fake download statistics. So basically what that study showed is when songs have more downloads, people were more likely to download that song. Same thing goes for when you see an artist with a lot of followers, likes, and comments. Typically you just assume since other people like them, then it's worth giving them a shot. This is called social proof. So this is why artists do this, basically just to trick people into checking out a song. I mean, when I check out a new artist, I always check out their top song because in my head, I'm thinking if all these other people like it, maybe I will too. I'm sure there are plenty of other reasons, but this is by far the biggest one. The second reason this matters and the reason it's an issue is because it's taking money from artists' pockets. Many of the articles I mentioned earlier in the video came out recently due to the studies done in the past few years. And one of the biggest things that a lot of these articles pointed to was the fact that the music industry was going to miss out on a lot of money. Now, I'm not going to pretend to fully understand why people are losing out on money because the payouts are really confusing, but according to Billboard, Rolling Stone, and others, people are missing out. Rolling Stone claimed that manipulations also lead to lower payouts for some acts that do not engage in this behavior. So I believe it has something to do with how streaming services pay out their artists. Regardless, Billboard estimates that anywhere between $175 to $525 million of streaming royalties are being lost to fraudulent streams. They even said this could be on the low end and that up to $1 billion could be lost to fake streams. This is one of the biggest issues with the fraudulent streams, and it seems like it could be hurting the smaller artists that are not participating in the scandal. So what's the takeaway from this? What can we do to help support the artists that are having money stolen out of their pockets? Well, I don't really know. I just think this is a crazy huge thing going on behind the scenes that's worth being aware of. I don't know if there's a solution, and I don't know if there needs to be a solution, but this is definitely something crazy that's going on behind the scenes, and it seems very top secret, so I'm excited to have brought this story to you guys. The now deleted documentary I kept referencing is really good, so I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Also, the guy who made it, Michael Williams, apparently passed away, which is really unfortunate because he seemed very talented, so make sure to check out that video if you want to see his work. Also, I saw a really good podcast from a channel called Brandman No Labels Necessary, covering how often bots are used and actually arguing that they're necessary. Streaming bots aren't just used on big artist songs. A lot of people will AI generate music and then bot those streams as well. Recently, a band named The Velvet Sundown has been getting quite a bit of attention online. In just a few weeks, they have managed to garner over 600,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, with many fans saying that they have been getting recommended this band's music through Spotify's weekly mixes and other algorithm-based promotion. But very quickly on Reddit and other social media platforms, fans noticed something strange. The Velvet Sundown isn't a real band, and all of their members aren't real people. On June 5th of this year, the Velvet Sundown released their album Floating on Echoes. Just 15 days later, they put out another album called Dust and Silence. Right away, it's pretty crazy to put out 2 albums in a row, but I guess it's possible. And also, their album covers don't look that great. Their music isn't really anything special and almost sounds soulless mixed with some really poor mixing.
Dust on the wind, boots on the ground, smoke in the sky, no peace found.
Over time, their tracks made it into people's weekly mixes or recommended songs on Spotify, and they began to rack up a few 100,000 streams, most of which actually seem to be organic, although it's very possible bots were at play. But very quickly, Redditors and others on the internet noticed something strange. If you look at their profile picture, the 4 band members don't really look like real people. Instead, they look AI generated. If you look even further at their Spotify description, it says, "There's something quietly spellbinding about the Velvet Sundown. You don't just listen to them, you drift into them. Their music doesn't shout for your attention, it seeps in slowly, like a scent that suddenly takes you back somewhere you didn't expect." Now, one thing about AI such as ChatGPT is it uses sentence structures sort of like it's not just X, it's Y. And once you notice this, if you interact with AI enough, it becomes increasingly easier to pick up on. But it doesn't end there. Before they were caught, they also had a fake Billboard review in their bio as well that said, "They sound like the memory of something you've never lived and somehow make it feel real," which is pretty strange that they just lied about having a Billboard review. The Spotify description continues to say, "The band was formed by singer and Mellotron player Gabe Farrow, guitarist Lenny West, Milo Raines, who crafts the band's textured synth sounds, and the free-spirited percussionist Orion Rio Del Mar. Together, they quietly build the perfect sound to get lost in." Multiple outlets, journalists, and internet sleuths have all looked into these people, and no one can find anything on them. Not one social media page, nothing. Also, their name is just pretty obviously ripped from the Velvet Underground. My favorite part about their Spotify description is when it says, "There aren't really any standout singles here, just songs that feel like they imitate conversations with yourself," which is really funny that they're just straight up acknowledging the fact that none of this music stands out at all. And it's almost like they're acknowledging that they are AI when the description reads, "The Velvet Sundown aren't trying to revive the past, they're rewriting it," which is quite literally what AI does. I've seen a few articles that are claiming that this band is making a ton of money from this, but at the time of recording, they have 600,000 monthly listeners, and since Spotify pays on the high end 0.005 cents per stream, they probably have only made like 3K from this, which definitely is a good chunk of change if they would continue to keep getting these types of plays. But I'm fairly certain that since they've been exposed and this is a whole big controversy, it's just the peak of their plays and it's probably going to drop off next month. Regardless, once you leave Spotify or any other music service to learn more about the band, everything becomes very clear. So one thing that's confusing is once you go to like Instagram or Twitter, there's multiple pages that are pretending to be the Velvet Sundown. So it's kind of confusing which ones are official and which ones aren't. This Instagram page isn't linked to them, but I've noticed a lot of journalists are reporting on this page, and it features a ton of pictures of these very clearly AI generated people that are supposed to represent the band members. I mean, there's even a picture of them recreating the Beatles album cover where they're all just the same height. I think this one may have been previously linked to them and then they switched it. Regardless though, a lot of people are reporting on this page, making it seem official, but it isn't technically official. I also, strangely enough, found some Twitter pages impersonating them too, but the weirdest thing is that on their actual official pages that are linked to their Spotify account, they keep posting this creepy promotional video.
Are you sure we're not real? Or did you just dream the dream again? You believed the lie and danced to it anyway. Paper Sun Rebellion, 14th July. Maybe we've already been there.
Clearly, this entire situation is disturbing. I mean, imagine listening to an artist that you found organically, maybe enjoying the music, and then finding out that the people in the picture aren't even real, and that the music might be AI generated as well. It isn't 100% confirmed that the music is also AI generated, but most people are assuming that, especially since the streaming service Deezer has marked the music as possibly AI generated since they recently rolled out a new feature that can check for that. Many listeners have also pointed out that all of their songs and song names seem heavily influenced by other popular artists and bands. Regardless, people are very upset. One person said, "Spotify has been shoving this band down my throat for the past few weeks. My Discover Weekly, my Daylist, my Daily Drive, my For You playlist. This is nuts. Generic plus mediocre psych rock with an essay of a bio and a fake band pick. Get me off this dystopic ride." In response to all the allegations about them being AI, the official Twitter page that's actually linked to their Spotify posted saying, "To all the journalists who wrote about us, thank you for listening. However, these are the only official pages of the band. All others are reflections, echoes, projections. Don't amplify what isn't us." So I think the main thing they're trying to do here is dispel the rumors of that one page that has all the AI photos of them. But it isn't just Spotify's algorithm that's recommending this band. There's something even stranger happening behind the scenes. The Velvet Sundown is featured in multiple huge Spotify playlists that each have hundreds of thousands of saves. Playlists like Vietnam War music, Good Morning, upbeat pop hits, and even sensual songs. Now, these aren't editorial playlists like official playlists that are made by Spotify, but they are definitely made in a way that is attempting to trick the listeners into thinking that they are Spotify editorial playlists. And Velvet Sundown actually has 26 songs in the Vietnam playlist, which is like 8% of the tracks in a playlist with over 600,000 saves. This is a strange method people use where they try to build up giant playlists full of songs with big artists in them and then can be paid by people to have their songs put into these big playlists. Because people who are just mindlessly listening to these big artists in these big playlists will likely be fine with some Velvet Sundown songs slipping in between the rest of their queue. It's similar to if you've ever looked up an album on YouTube or like searched full album and played the playlist. You may have noticed that at the end a random 1 hour long compilation song will be playing, and that's how a lot of those playlist makers make their money. This is probably the main other way that Velvet Sundown has began to get recommended to people and got all this attention. But all of this left fans with a few questions, like who is paying to promote this AI generated band and who is actually behind it? One big theory that's been going around is that Spotify themselves are actually behind the Velvet Sundown. One person was talking about how it showed up in their Discover Weekly, and a Redditor responded, "Not even just showing up by chance. Spotify is 100% intentionally pushing it." Back in 2023, I actually made a video that I ended up scrapping for some reason about similar allegations against Spotify. The allegations claimed that Spotify was releasing a bunch of fake music by fake artists and putting it in playlists, recommending it to people, and things along those lines so that they wouldn't have to pay out record labels. Many speculated this music was AI generated at the time, and also all of the songs were from a record label called Skytech Distributions. And the only website people could find about this record company shows that Skytech had released 195 of these stock photo AI generated name type of albums. The reason that Spotify would do something like this is because 2024 was the only and the first year that they made a profit. So before then, Spotify has consistently been losing out on money. One of their biggest expenses is paying out royalties to labels, so it would make sense that if they had their own music, all of that would go back into their pocket. And the threat of Spotify releasing a bunch of AI or fake or ghost music is very real, and it could cause a lot of problems for real artists. Even recently, Spotify was accused of hiring 20 different writers to write for over 500 individual artists on the platform. The journalist who published the story interviewed former Spotify staff, like playlist editors, who said a lot of employees didn't even know where this music was coming from. Apparently, a lot of popular editorial playlists like ambient relaxation, deep focus, and cocktail jazz all had these ghost songs with potential AI being used as well. Journalist Liz Pelly said Spotify editorial employees saw this new column on their dashboards pop up called Perfect Fit Content that was labeled music commissioned to fit a certain playlist/mood with improved margins. And I'm sure you guys can get what improved margins means at this point. Spotify for years has denied that they make their own music in-house, but with the amount of allegations coming from previous employees, it's pretty clear that this is something that is happening. There was even a report that suggested AI could cause creators a 24% loss in the music industry if things keep going the way they're going by 2028. So it is very possible and probably already happening that Spotify is trying to get in on this early. But the only thing that makes this theory not really make sense when it's related to the Velvet Sundown is the fact that the song songs were uploaded to a variety of different streaming services. If that's the case though, then who's behind this? Well, Rolling Stone was actually able to get a hold of the person who was behind this project. Despite all the theories from fans as this went viral, Rolling Stone was able to lock in an interview with the man who was behind the Velvet Sundown. Even though the Twitter account had been denying that it was AI, a man named Andrew Fraylon said to Rolling Stone that it was actually an AI band. Also, we don't even know if Andrew Fraylon is his real name or who he is, but I'm trusting Rolling Stone verified their sources. Regardless, he told them in an interview, "It's marketing, it's trolling. People before, they didn't care about what we did. And now, suddenly, we're talking to Rolling Stone. So it's like, is that wrong?" He continued to say, "Personally, I'm interested in art hoaxes. We live in a world now where things that are fake have sometimes even more impact than things that are real. And that's messed up, but that's the reality that we face now. So it's like, should we ignore that reality? Should we ignore these things that kind of exist on a continuum of real versus fake? Or kind of a blend between the two? Or should we dive into it and just let it be the emerging native language of the internet?" Very weird things he's talking about. Apparently, during the first interview, he claimed that AI was only used for the brainstorming of the music, but then he eventually admitted to using a program called Suno, which can generate music. Eventually, he admitted to using Suno to generate multiple songs, which leads us to believe that he used it for everything. He also said something sort of shady. When the interviewer asked him how he got onto those big playlists, he sort of dodged the question. He said, "I'm not running the Spotify backend stuff, so I can't super speak to exactly how that happened. I know we got on some playlists that just have like tons of followers, and it seems to have spiraled from there." When asked if they used playlists of their own, he said, "I don't have an answer that I can give to you because I'm not involved, and I don't want to say something that's not true." So in my head, this means a few things. It's possible that this was someone related to Spotify, or what might be more likely is it was one of the people who ran those playlists I was talking about, trying to make money by sneaking in their own AI generated tracks, which is actually kind of a really smart sort of scam. You know, you build up a playlist to hundreds of thousands of followers and then sneak in your own AI generated garbage music. Fans have said in response to the Rolling Stone article though, it's only been framed as an art hoax to cover their asses because the person in question got found out. Guaranteed this would have gone quietly unnoticed on playlists, creaming off royalties and taking up space from other artists for a number of years if Redditors hadn't spotted it. But Andrew Fraylon also said something else interesting, and it was the fact that he used a program called Suno. Suno is a program that can AI generate tracks, and it's been picking up steam lately in the music industry, with even professional artists like Timbaland launching their own AI artists utilizing the same program. For example, recently Timbaland, a legendary producer in the music industry, launched an AI entertainment company called Stage Zero and an AI generated artist called Tata. Timbaland said, "Tata is a living, learning, autonomous music artist built with AI. Tata is the start of something bigger. She's the first artist of a new generation. A-pop is the next cultural evolution, and Tata is its first icon." Ironically enough, Timbaland said that he did this because he thinks music right now is soulless, which is really funny when you're making an AI artist, which is the definition of soulless. When Timbaland got a ton of backlash for this, another music industry executive came out in defense of him, and what he said was kind of crazy.
"Do you know how hard it is to push an artist? They gonna tell you, I don't want to do that." Jimmy Iovine famously told me one day, "Get you something that don't talk back." What is better than an AI artist that don't talk back?
There was also the incident back in 2022 when the AI rapper FN Meka was actually signed to Capitol Records. Other than Meka's voice, everything else was AI generated. Immediately, people were upset, not just at the fact that it was AI, but also at the fact that the rapper used the N-word and just seemed to be like a racist caricature of what the creator thought rap was. This caused a lot of problems for FN Meka, the first ever AI artist to be signed to a record label, so immediately he was dropped from the label, however that works. But this hasn't been the only time that record labels have worked with AI. For example, Warner Music Group, one of the big 3 record labels, started working with an AI company called Endel. Most recently, they were shooting to create 50 ambient sort of albums with AI. Regardless, I thought this was a very crazy thing, and as generative AI just continues to get better and better, it could mean trouble for the music industry, musicians, and music fans alike. So it's up to the listeners to protest against this while they still can before it becomes indiscernible from regular artists. And maybe one day streaming services will work on programs like Deezer did and mark songs as AI generated, and possibly even give you an option to toggle on and off AI generated music, and I'm sure most people will have that toggled off if that were the reality. And while AI music sucks, Lil Mabu and his fake image is arguably even worse. Lil Mabu has 6 million monthly listeners, hundreds of millions of streams, and 2 songs that have charted on Billboard. And he did all of this by meticulously crafting the perfect rap career. Not only did he make a rap career for himself, but he made a rap career in the drill scene, a scene that is notorious for violent and aggressive gangster rap. And well, Mabu clearly doesn't fit into that genre. He's a rich white kid who lived in a multi-million-dollar house growing up, not a drill rapper looking for a way out of the hood. But despite all of that, Lil Mabu's position in the rap game as a young white kid couldn't be any better. He has lots of good relationships with artists, entertaining content, a perfect image, entertaining beefs, and just enough controversy to where he won't get in trouble. It's so good it almost seems planned, and I think it was. But it took a few steps for Mabu to get here, 5 main ones in particular that I was able to identify. So let's see how Lil Mabu was able to craft the perfect rap career. Also, by the way, my name is Matty Balls, and I'm going to be posting weekly music related videos every Sunday at 12 p.m. CST, so if you're interested, make sure to stick around. Even Mabu likes him, so maybe you will too. Now let's get into it. To have a successful career in the music industry, it's important to have money. And luckily for Lil Mabu, he has quite a bit of money at his disposal. His real name is Matthew DeLuca, and he lives at his parents' 5-bed, 5-bath, 3,327 square foot condo on the Upper East Side. So if the square footage or number of bedrooms and bathrooms didn't tip you off, the kid's parents are loaded. Not only does he live in one of the most affluent neighborhoods in New York, but Mabu's family also has a vacation destination in the Hamptons, where his family owns a 6,182 square foot manse in Watermill. The two properties combined equate to a value of around $12 million total. So where did all this money come from? Well, Mabu's father is a guy by the name of Peter DeLuca. He's a Manhattan funeral director that came upon his wealth not only by trade, but also with the help of a controversial divorce settlement with his ex-wife. Between the odd job of being a funeral director, the old money aesthetic, the sticky situation with his ex-wife, and the interesting fact of Mabu's father having a rare NYC permit to carry a concealed gun, everything surrounding Mabu feels strange. On top of that, Mabu attended the collegiate school, the nearly 400-year-old Manhattan prep that costs $60,000 a year and has schooled generations of Vanderbilts and Kennedys. On their website, they even mentioned being accredited as a member of both the New York Interschool and the Ivy Preparatory School League. This obviously means pretty much nothing to most of us normal people, but for context, they are basically one of the 8 best schools in New York. So like I mentioned earlier, Mabu's backstory is the least hard drill rapper thing ever. The majority of this information on Mabu's previously unknown backstory spawned because of a video of young Mabu that leaked online.
My name is Matthew DeLuca. I go to the collegiate school. I'm in 9th grade, and my favorite thing about Kids Walk for MSK Kids is getting together with friends and family to support such a wonderful cause.
Ironically enough, it was around this time in Mabu's freshman year of high school that he would technically make his first song. The track was called Winnie the Pooh, and it is absolutely unlike anything he makes now. This song was followed by many more, along with some amazing visuals that he created on TikTok.
I'm on scene, my phone is blowing up, I got gushers in my lean, foreigns whizzing down the road, be rich and all we see is green. Yeah, they're green.
The point is that this music was not drill, not even close, but he was still able to amass over 30,000 followers by the end of 2020. Also, when I was researching this, I found a blog post like that one and many more in 2020 that I think may have been paid for, but that's just speculation. At the time, Lil Mabu was just a rich little white boy making music, but it's clear that he wanted to become a rapper. Regardless, Mabu had money at his disposal that would likely be very useful in launching the next phase of his career. One thing that is extremely important for any artist in any genre is their image. And if you look at Lil Mabu, he doesn't look like the kind of kid to make drill music. Maybe he looks like a good bass player in a band, but not a rapper. So he had to create the perfect image for his audience. And that's exactly what he did. Mabu continued releasing the same old music, the poppy SoundCloud emo rap that he had been making, and it was improving in quality, but he wasn't getting much attention. His dreams of being a rapper were going nowhere. So this is when Mabu decided to switch genres. Despite how ridiculous it may seem for a rich white kid to make some drill rap, Mabu did exactly that in 2021 with the songs Move It, Demon Time, and eventually a whole album called Double M's. These songs were able to help Mabu get some buzz, and it also helped that he got some features. Mabu got his first features from artists like Dusty Locane, Sha EK, Dougie B, and more, all of whom are real drill rappers. And by real drill rappers, I mean they are about what they rap about, unlike our boy Mabu. Due to his high-class background, I think it's fair to assume that Mabu paid for some of these features at the time, especially since he was fairly unknown back then. One of Mabu's collaborators, Sha EK, explains the situation best. He said, "Drill rap is like aggressive music. Yeah, basically kids expressing their feelings, but in their way. It's the way they do it because they can't talk to nobody else. Best way to get everything off your chest. He went on to talk about Mabu in particular, saying he was a good kid and ready to work, but that his life of privilege was limiting. He don't have street cred, but they just respect it because they know he has music talent. For a guy with Mabu's privilege, one of the only ways he could get any type of positive credibility rested on the shoulders of those Mabu associates with. Mabu's goal was to gain credibility in the drill scene strictly through association, so basically no drill activities, which isn't very surprising, and it adds to the negative history of white rappers making gains off of those in the community who actually suffered the trials that gave birth to the genre. However, a key difference between Mabu and other white kids who have tried making drill music is how he reacted to the criticism and actually leveraged it to his advantage. Instead of getting defensive, he would go on to troll his haters by making fun of his background himself. Mabu had found his image, and it was to acknowledge and joke about the fact that everything he raps about, he isn't actually about. Even the album cover for Double M's displays two versions of Mabu, one side being his wealthy academic background, and the other assumably being his drill persona. By not trying to hide his true self from the world and embracing the contrast, he would begin to thrive off the hate. This was mainly exhibited on his TikToks, many of which went viral because of his comedic spin on being a white drill rapper.
Why you lacking?
Lacking? What you mean, bro?
Like, oh, you know where you at right now? Like, bro, I really take everything off you, bro. Like,
I'm outside Dolly. You know Mabu's body, bro.
Yo, Mabu, like, what you got on you? Like, oh, he got the now.
The image Mabu crafted for himself was similar to Lil Dicky, an ironic white rapper who makes jokes about his awkward spot in the rap game. The only difference is people seem to enjoy Mabu's music a bit more than Lil Dicky's. And it was these videos on TikTok that cemented Mabu's position as a new age hybrid of an influencer slash rapper. Mabu heavily utilized TikTok to get his name out there.
Today we're showing strangers my music, part 1. Let's go. I'm here with...
No camera, the protection. My name is Luis.
I can never snitch.
This you, mother?
Yeah.
You sound very black. What's the name? What's it called?
I called it No Snitching.
Not only was Mabu joking about his strange image on TikTok, but he was also joking about it in his music. In songs like No Snitching, he's rapping all tough, talking about shooting guns and how he wouldn't snitch, while in the music video, he's just some scrawny white kid. One of the top comments on the video is, "We making it out the gated community with this one." He plays on this idea even more in the song Trip to the Hood, where the chorus is literally, "I took a trip to the hood so I can make it out, just so y'all can't say I got shit handed down." The music video depicts Mabu leaving his fancy house and walking out into the hood. A lot of people did get offended by this, but many people also really like the song. So him playing on this joke of being a rich white kid making violent drill music has worked out very well for him. And songs like I mentioned have helped him to blow up. Lil Mabu has his image down, a fake gangster rapper who plays on the fact he's actually just a rich white boy.
Yo, Fabi, I got a question. Can I do a hit on a scooter?
But to truly succeed in the music industry, Lil Mabu not only had to earn the acceptance of the fans, but the acceptance of the artists in the genre. How would a high school kid get in touch with artists like Lil Durk, PNB Rock, Lil Mosey, Tory Lanez, and more recently people like 504 and NLE Choppa? He was even good friends with PNB Rock back in 2021, which is very surprising. You would think that a rich white kid cosplaying as a drill artist would turn away people from wanting to work with him. Maybe Lil Mabu's an industry plant. Maybe he paid his way to the presence of these popular artists. Or maybe it was something else. Well, I can't say for sure that he has paid for features. With the way the industry works and the position Mabu was in, it's hard to think he didn't pay for some of his earlier features. Although some of his interactions early on with artists like PNB Rock make it seem like it was more organic. However, as his career grew, it's likely a lot of these interactions were due to his virality. So as it goes for how Mabu made these connections, it adds up to a mix of pay to play and virality, which lends even more significance to his influencer approach. But it wasn't just his album Double M's, his other early drill singles, and the TikToks that got him his notoriety. In fact, his first big hit that captured major attention came after. This hit track was his song Mathematical Disrespect, which dropped in May of 2023. The song amassed around 70 million combined views on YouTube. Not only this, but it also entered Mabu into Billboard's Hot 100 for the first time. Well, he did have a slight blow up previously with Trip to the Hood. It was Mathematical Disrespect that really got the ball rolling. And what makes this all even more impressive is that Lil Mabu self-released the single, and in the song he says, "Shout out my label, that's me. I own 100% of my cuts, nobody taking a fee. Charting on the Billboard Hot 100 without a label is undeniably a major accomplishment. It also stirs up confusion, which led to many people calling him an industry plant, and it even caused rumors that his dad was a record label CEO to start.
And contrary to popular belief, you know I don't address nothing, but I don't have a manager, I'm not signed to a label, and my father is not in the music business.
Regardless, even if there was no label involved, I'm willing to bet that he got some of his startup money from his dad, because obviously he's got a lot of money. But Mabu didn't just get his connections through payola and virality. It seems like he also had a mysterious marketing business back in 2020. According to Last.fm, which may not be super reliable, Lil Mabu launched a promotional company in late 2020, granting himself the connections necessary to bolster the growth of his career, as well as providing the capital to fund his endeavors. There isn't really much evidence of this business apart from Patrick CC's video on Mabu, where he mentioned that Mabu previously reached out to him.
Turns out Lil Mabu actually DM'd me 3 years ago looking to do some business. I own a marketing company and I'm 15. I'd be down to work with you, and I was wondering if I could explain my services and what I can provide. Feel free to contact me. I work with artists like Lil Keed, 42 Doug, Lil Blurry, and other celebrity clients. My team run group chats with hundreds of thousands of people, email lists, and page promotion with a reach of millions.
Like I said, I can't find out anything else about this business, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was true and he was able to get some connections from it, especially since he is really good at marketing. If he was able to find a way to blow himself up, it's reasonable to assume he could do the same for others. Whether it was money from his dad, his viral rise to fame, or a marketing business he had when he was 15, a lot of artists in the industry grew to like Mabu.
Real talk, shout out Mabu, you know what I'm saying? You really still in school. I'm proud of you. Take care of this shit. Take care of your business. And most important, despite all the internet shit and viralness, education is the most important, so I condemn you for that.
You're doing like the reactions that...
And while Mabu had virality on his side, he still had to secure a real fan base. Although many would hate and wish for his downfall, lately it seems like those haters' wishes fell short. There's a reason that everyone online has been calling Lil Mabu a marketing genius. Whether or not you like him, Mabu is amazing at creating both content and music that catches people's attention. He maintained his drill persona while keeping the ironic twist, doing things like using Nerf guns in music videos instead of real guns. But after his extreme success from Mathematical Disrespect, Mabu went quiet. The decision to go dark came as a result of his graduating from high school. He explained in a video called Why I've Been Gone that he wanted to spend time with friends and family before going off to college, and then decided himself to go to school. Apparently, around this time, he had a bunch of labels and people in the industry reaching out to him, perplexed at his decision to go to college. But it turns out it might just be another marketing opportunity for Mabu. And it's not like he's going to some random college. He attends Emory University, which is just outside of Atlanta, has a steep acceptance rate of 11%, and has nearly a $60,000 a year tuition. But just because Lil Mabu took a break during the summer doesn't mean that he wasn't plotting. In fact, in the same video where Mabu was explaining his leave, he also mentioned that he had an album in the works. And just like how he was able to market himself amazingly when he was coming out, he had some even better ideas for his comeback. After returning to music, Mabu decided to target the popular rapper Blueface in a diss track called Mr. Take Ya Bitch. He made this song with Blueface's ex-girlfriend and mother of his child, Krishan Rock. This was a major moment for many who followed Blueface and Krishan Rock's relationship. Their dramatic relationship has honestly been more popular than Blueface's music career for the past handful of years. Their toxic relationship was very public and created a plethora of viral moments. So, in the song, Mabu was talking about taking Blueface's girl and all sorts of things along those lines. The track took the internet by storm, and the flashy music video currently has 41 million views on YouTube. The song even peaked at 33 on the Billboard charts. This not only got Mabu even closer to being mainstream, but it also got rid of the one-hit wonder label. Mabu even doubled down on the controversy when he released a video where it looked like he had been jumped. This clip sent the internet into a frenzy, with many claiming it was Blueface that pulled up on him. Unsurprisingly, in reality it was just another marketing scheme by Mabu, as the clip was behind the scenes for one of his music videos. They also played it up to the point where many people assumed that Krishan and Mabu were dating, but that wasn't true. And to add to the confusion and controversy, Krishan went onto a podcast to complain that she received no money for her feature on the song. Regardless, this drama was great for views, and by this point, Lil Mabu had planted himself in the music industry.
So that's what you do right now, marketing.
Everybody thought you was what?
Industry
plant? But you wasn't.
I am. I planted myself.
Using the first 4 steps, Lil Mabu was able to craft an obviously fake image that he was able to market as a joke to millions of people, and he made a lot of important relationships along the way. Lil Mabu quite literally faked it until he made it. But then another problem arose for the young rapper. Lil Mabu uses a lot of marketing gimmicks, so he walks a fine line of being a regular rapper or a gimmick rapper. Some other examples of gimmick rappers could be people like Mario Judah or 6ix9ine. People who are much more known for their ventures and incidents outside of the music. Their music also tends to be pretty gimmicky too, kind of like Mabu's. As a result, a lot of them, like 6ix9ine for example, don't last very long in the music industry. But Lil Mabu, especially recently, has been proving that he has potential to make it last. Thanks to Step, you'd probably be disappointed to find out that the system that's meant to promote artists doesn't actually do what it's supposed to.
The other day, bright and early in the morning, I got tagged in a tweet possibly exposing Spotify for lying about how they run their platform, more specifically their playlists. Over the past few years, I've seen Spotify has been in a lot of hot water for a variety of reasons, whether it's acquiring Joe Rogan's controversial podcast to creating fake artists. But the tweet I was tagged in brought up a whole new issue with Spotify that has gone relatively unspoken, and it could really affect both the artists and listeners. The issue I found seems like it contradicts Spotify's many statements about how they run their platform. However, to really understand this issue, since I definitely didn't at first, we have to learn a little bit more about Spotify. Now, I'm sure you guys know what Spotify is, so I'm not going to explain it too much. And if you don't know what Spotify is, I don't know what to tell you. I'm not sure why you clicked on this video. But Spotify has essentially replaced the need for these and these. Physical copies of music were how artists were guaranteed to get paid a fixed amount. But with the age of digital streaming services, there are new methods of how revenue is generated and then paid out. But this new system has been a hot topic of debate, especially when it comes to Spotify. Artists on Spotify get paid about 0.004 cents per stream. This has caused a lot of controversy as other platforms like Apple Music pay 0.0075 cents per stream and Tidal pays 0.0128 cents per stream. Many people think Spotify pays way too low as it is the largest music streaming service. Although who's to say what's too much or too little when it comes to streaming revenue? The reason that I'm bringing up the pay is because it really demonstrates just how much Spotify has changed the music industry, and it also demonstrates how much power they have. The introduction of DSPs like Spotify has revolutionized the music industry and will continue to do so. However, payout is just the surface of Spotify's hot topics, and our main topic for this video is Spotify's playlist system. Playlists in general are one of Spotify's defining features. There are 3 types of Spotify playlists: personalized, editorial, and listener playlists. Listener playlists are the ones that you make on your own, so it's pretty self-explanatory. Personalized playlists are created by algorithms and are personally tailored to each individual listener based on what they already listen to. Some of these playlists would include your daily mix or your Discover Weekly. Spotify really boasts on these playlists and their ability to help listeners find new artists and songs, and they claimed in 2020 that they drive 16 billion artist discoveries a month. I feel like it's a little bit of an overestimate, but I'm gonna let it slide. Then there's Spotify's most celebrated type of playlist, the editorial playlist. These playlists have anywhere from hundreds of thousands to millions of followers, and getting onto an editorial playlist could mean millions of streams and potential new fans. For example, Rap Caviar is one of the biggest and most popular editorials, and getting a placement on here means guaranteed new fans and new streams. So what makes these playlists so significant is that, as Spotify says, these playlists are curated by our playlist editors. These editorials though have also come under fire, since because of how popular they are, Spotify can either blackball whoever they want to or promote whoever they want to. You're probably thinking, well, blackballing people is obviously bad, but what's wrong with promoting people? Well, for example, Spotify was in another controversy for creating and promoting fake artists. Fake artists? What? Why would Spotify make those? Well, people have done extensive research and claim that Spotify allegedly has created fake artists, put them into editorial playlists, and then kept all the revenue for themselves, just so that they don't have to pay real artists. Hello Yassine made a very good and detailed video on this, so feel free to check that out after this one if you're interested in this topic. But people think that Spotify did this because there were hundreds of artists with no online presence that were all signed to some random record label called Firefly Entertainment. Firefly Entertainment held the second highest amount of placements in editorial playlists in 2020. So basically, Spotify is buying music, promoting it as if it's someone else's, and then keeping all the revenue for themselves rather than giving the money and the placements to actual artists who make that type of music but are real people. But since these playlists are so coveted, how does the average artist get onto an editorial playlist? Well, artists can actually pitch their songs to Spotify by filling out a variety of things such as a description and a bunch of tags relating to their song. Then it's believed that editors look through these pitches and pick the songs best fit for the editorial playlist. Many people think that because these editorials are curated by people that you have to know them or have an in or write a really good pitch. And there's even services online that charge for pitches or helping artists get onto editorials that we will see shortly are nothing but a scam. On the website, Spotify says their playlists are created by our editorial teams or based on personalized data. Each playlist is designed to leave a lasting impression on your listeners. So it does seem like Spotify is alluding to these playlists partially being curated by algorithms, but Spotify hasn't been entirely telling the truth. The tweet that I mentioned in the beginning of the video was from an artist named Sadzilla. He has 300,000 monthly listeners and makes his living from music. On September 23rd, he released a song called Gonna Cost Ya that got picked up for a popular editorial playlist known as Tirade, which has 300,000 followers. He even got the #1 spot on the playlist. It sounds pretty cool until he found out that his distributor messed up the audio, so it just repeated the first 29 seconds over and over again for the duration of the song. So why would a playlist curator hear this song and then put it at the top of this editorial? Well, they most likely didn't hear it and it was just placed there by an algorithm. Later that day, the song was fixed, but it left people with a lot of questions. Why would Spotify seemingly lie about how their playlists work? Why do they have a pitching system if it's just an algorithm? Does it even matter if it's an algorithm or an actual human picking the songs for these playlists? Well, to answer these questions, I gave Sadzilla a call to learn a little bit more. Yo, what's up everybody? It's Future Balls here. Just wanted to say real quick that none of the views and claims I make in this video are reflective of Sadzilla's opinions. He's very fond of the platform and has a very deep understanding, which is why I reached out to him about the situation. So I just wanted to stipulate that in case anyone at Spotify HQ is watching. Thank you. So how big is it for you as an independent artist who lives off his music to get onto an editorial playlist?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, it's a huge boost to your streams. It's basically Spotify's way of giving you a freebie. Spotify is basically acknowledging hey, you've done good up to this point, and here is some free streams, basically.
Once you got your song fixed, have you seen more traction than usual?
Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. Every single time I land on an editorial, I get some kind of boost, you know? It just matters on what the editorial is, you know? I mean, some are smaller than others, some are bigger than others.
So if they were using an algorithm, why do you think that your song would have made it to the playlist?
Because I just send good positive signals to Spotify. So what I mean by that is I work with people in my scene. I don't buy onto fake playlists. I am only pushing my music towards people who will most likely like my music.
Okay, so there's a lot more algorithm in Spotify than most people probably think.
Honestly, I would say it's probably the most intelligent algorithm or, you know, system that I've ever come across. And I've, you know, done marketing on things like Instagram or Facebook and stuff like that before. And Spotify is definitely the most intellectual, for sure.
What do you think the significance of these editorial playlists being algorithmic is rather than them actually being listened to by real humans?
Positives first is that because it's an algorithm, you don't have to go through any kind of gatekeeper. You don't have to know somebody over at Spotify in order to get on one of these playlists. You just have to do your due diligence and, you know, get your music out there to the right people, the right audiences, and then eventually Spotify will reward you. So it's good that, you know, you have the algorithm doing this in a lot of cases because you're going to get a lot more placements. You don't have that many employees to be able to, you know, pick and choose every single thing. And that's totally understandable that they wouldn't have those people to be able to do that. And that's why they have an algorithm and AI that does this stuff so well. But the negatives is like what we came across, this situation where, you know, something is wrong. And even though everything in the system works and it sounds like this is a great song to push out to people on this playlist, something's wrong with it and the AI didn't pick up on it. One of the things that's interesting about this and the reason that it landed on there is because I also had 2 other people on the song. So we're sending all these good signals to Spotify. It's like, hey, yo, here's 3 people that fit great on this playlist. This will be a great fit for the top spot.
What is your last message for the artists and Spotify users out there?
Honestly, my message to artists is just try to understand what Spotify is. before, you know, you put too much faith in the pitching process or have high hopes on, you know, whether or not you're going to land in an editorial, because there's so many factors that factor into this. All you have to do is just put your head down, do the work, and do it correctly. No shortcuts. Just do the work, and you know, eventually you'll get rewarded, whether or not it's by an actual person listening to your music or it's the algorithm. Either way, it works. It gets your music out to people that will like your music, and I think that's great. And I'm internally grateful for Spotify even giving me the opportunity to be on a playlist like that. So it's just really cool. But at the same time, it's just like, I think this is a good lesson for everybody. All the other artists out there that they think that they're being held back by somebody, when it's not really that case at all. I mean, you just have to put the work in, get your music out there, get it to the right people, and like I said, you'll get rewarded.
So like Sadzilla said, there's pros and cons to it being algorithmic. Some cons include quality control and people scamming, while the pros include targeting the right audience for your music. Spotify says that their mission is to give millions of artists the opportunity to live off of their art, but if these editorials are done algorithmically, they could be missing out on talented artists that deserve a chance. Obviously, like Sadzilla said, these playlists still are giving artists lots of big opportunities, but the only issue is they don't seem to operate like how Spotify was suggesting. I wouldn't say that Spotify is entirely lying about how these playlists work, but they are being pretty misleading.